With the metal dragon god Viernes finally sealed away, only one challenge remains: Ignia, the last of the dragon gods. As Sabretooth returns to their guild, Fairy Tail continues the search alone. Will they at last complete the 100-year quest and defeat Ignia? Let's find out. In the town of Magnolia, a small apartment by the riverside was shown. This was where Cobra, a poison dragon slayer, lived. However, Cobra was now his old codename. He currently uses his real name, Eric. His fiancée, Kanana, was introduced. She visits Eric's apartment occasionally to help with laundry and cleaning. Kanana was actually his former snake partner. He never imagined that she was a human in a snake's body. Kanana asked why he was staring at her. He replied that it was nothing. She reminded him that he wasn't supposed to read people's thoughts. Eric acknowledged that he knew this. Here, we learn that he can hear other people's thoughts. He joked that perhaps he should have been an ear dragon slayer instead of a poison dragon slayer. Eric mentioned that he was surprised when he found out she was the former Cubelios. She responded that she couldn't remember anything from that time, which made Eric glad. Kanana then asked if Eric had named her back then. He hesitated, unsure of how to answer. Kanana blushed and said that name was cool, but in her thoughts, she didn't really think so. Eric was confused as he heard her thoughts. He mentions how she hadn't liked it after all. She then told him he shouldn't be reading others' thoughts. His fiancée asked if he had any interest in joining Fairy Tail. Kanana thought the master would be pleased and allow him to join. He didn't seem interested and asked if she was kidding. Kanana encouraged him to at least check it out, saying Fairy Tail was full of great people. Eric just sighed in response. So, they decided to visit the Fairy Tail Guild. Upon opening the door, Eric wasn't impressed and thought the people there were irritating. Kanana always told him not to listen to others' thoughts, but he couldn't help it if he suddenly heard them. That's why he was sure he'd hear a lot there. At the guild, Eric asked if Natsu was there. Kanana replied that he was on a long-term job. Eric smiled, thinking he could find Natsu's embarrassing secrets there. He then noticed Gajeel and Levi chatting at a table and realized Natsu wasn't the only dragon slayer in the guild. Meanwhile, Gajeel asked how Levi was feeling, and she responded that she was fine. However, Eric overheard Gajeel's thoughts, revealing his nervousness about being a suitable father. Levi, on the other hand, was concerned that Gajeel might feed their child iron. On the other hand, Lily was thinking about buying kiwi on the way home later. As Eric observed his surroundings, he thought to himself that he could hear all their thoughts, so they might as well continue. His next targets were Juvia and Kana. To his surprise, their thoughts were remarkably consistent. Kana's mind was full of alcohol, while Juvia's was occupied with thoughts of Gray. Eric was annoyed, wishing he hadn't heard that. Jet and Droy were discussing Levi's upcoming wedding. Although Droy commented that he was happy for her, he wondered if it was too late to steal her from Gajeel. Jet admitted to himself that he also liked Levi. Hearing these thoughts, Eric concluded that the guild was over. While drinking, Macau and Wakaba noticed Eric observing their guild. Romeo mentioned that he was Kanana's fiancé, and Wakaba asked if he was from Oration Seas. Eric, looking surprised, wondered what's with these old men who smelled of alcohol and tobacco. Macau said Eric could check out their guild as much as he liked, but internally, he was thinking about the things he had done with Kanana. Wakaba claimed Fairy Tail was a good guild, but in his mind, this was because many girls there showed a lot of skin. However, young Romeo just wondered who was stronger between Natsu and Eric. Eric responded that he was stronger. The three were puzzled by this. From the side, Mira Jane noticed Eric and thought he was a new member of Fairy Tail, so she welcomed him. Lisana replied that he was just observing for now. Eric read that Mira Jane was thinking about what to cook for dinner, while Lisana was hoping for curry. He found them boring. Suddenly, Elfman approached Eric, making him curious about who he was. Elfman just told him to enjoy himself, but in his mind, he thought Eric would be in trouble if he lays a hand on his sisters. Because of this, Eric thought Elfman was a good guy, but he had no intention of touching them. On the other side, the Thunder God tribe just stared at Eric, wondering if he was after Laxus or Elfman. Laxus suddenly approached him. He asked if Eric was with them when they fought Acnologia, to which Eric replied yes. Laxus was actually thinking about how quickly he could defeat Eric, wondering if it would take 10 seconds or maybe just 5. However, he said he was pleased to meet Eric, to which Eric responded that Laxus was very disturbing. Suddenly, someone spoke to Eric, saying he seemed to be enjoying reading others' thoughts. This worried Eric, and he searched for who it was and how they knew about his power. He looked at Master Makarov, but he appeared to be sleeping, so it wasn't him. Then he noticed a man staring at him, who turned out to be Warren. Eric couldn't believe Warren's telepathy skill. While sitting at a table, Warren spoke to him, saying his telepathy power wasn't unlimited, but he could talk to those with open channels because they wanted to listen. He introduced himself as Warren Rocco with a creepy smile. Eric's expression was indescribable. Max, Vegeta, and Jonah were curious about why Warren's face looked so creepy and uncool. Eric heard this and tried to hold back his laughter. He said it seemed Warren couldn't read others' thoughts. To Warren, it didn't matter, since he could hear Eric's thoughts, and that was enough. Eric was shocked by this. Warren stuck out his tongue at him and said Eric's thoughts were leaking all over the place. He teased him, saying he could list 10 things Eric liked about his beloved Kanana. As Warren began listing them one by one, Eric became extremely embarrassed and made him stop. Warren gave an evil smile, having caught Eric out. Upon returning to their apartment, Kanana asked Eric what he thought about the guild. He was visibly worried, and his only thought was that there was someone even more frightening than Laxus and Urza there. He replied that it was impossible for him to join such a guild. In his mind, he made a note to remember Warren Rocco. We then see Ichiya, introducing himself as the hunky head of the wizard guild Blue Pegasus. Blue Pegasus is said to be a guild for the beautiful. Ichiya looked at the window and admitted that he was in love with a certain woman. He pressed his face against the glass and noticed her perfume. The woman's name was Anna, and she was a teacher now. However, the truth was that she was born 400 years ago and was an impressive celestial wizard. She was an ancestor of Lucy from Fairy Tale. Anna then paused when she noticed Ichiya staring at her. When their eyes met, Anna simply smiled, and Ichiya turned into a red Pegasus from excitement. The scene shifted to what appeared to be a fine dining restaurant, where Ichiya complimented Anna's perfume. Anna blushed and said that he always took her to delicious restaurants. Ichiya suddenly asked why she decided to become an elementary school teacher. Anna replied that she loved teaching. She reminded him that she had once taken care of Natsu and the others. Ichiya admitted that he sometimes forgot Anna was born 400 years ago, and so Anna joked that she was dating an old lady who was 4 centuries old. Ichiya leaned in and said there was nothing wrong with that, adding that age is just a number. Anna called him a charmer. Ichiya posed to kiss her, but Anna made a peace sign and said not in the restaurant. She insisted that everything should follow the proper order, and Ichiya agreed with this. He said that when he thought of Anna, his heart raced. While showering, Ichiya mentioned that he was sensitive to fragrances, but he couldn't help being more particular about himself now. That's why he was bathing thoroughly. He scrubbed every corner and part of his body with utmost care, repeating the process several times. After putting on a robe, he said the fan service was now over. While drinking wine, Ichiya said something was troubling him. If Anna was Lucy's ancestor, it meant she had given birth. Ichiya broke into a sweat, thinking that she might already be married. As a man, he felt this didn't diminish her appeal, but it raised ethical questions. So, he considered asking her about it. However, Anna always responded that everything should be in the proper order. Ichiya wondered what that meant. He closed his eyes and concentrated, trying to think of what question to start with. It seemed too blunt to directly ask if she was married or had children. He thought about asking if she liked children, but the answer was obvious since she taught elementary students. And so the next day, As Ichiya and Anna were walking, Ichiya repeatedly rehearsed the question about whether Anna liked children. When he finally gathered the courage, he addressed Anna. He apologized for what he was about to ask, and despite his struggle, he managed to voice his thoughts. He asked Anna if she wanted to have a child with him.
Huh?
Anna was surprised by the straightforward question, while Ichiya felt embarrassed about what he had said. When Anna didn't respond, Ichiya became nervous and considered rephrasing the question. But Anna became serious before answering yes, she wanted to, with a smile. Ichiya couldn't believe it. At the Blue Pegasus Guild, Eve was shocked to learn about Ichiya's proposal. Rin was impressed, while Jinny had the opposite reaction. Ichiya proudly announced that he was getting married. He apologized to Urza, saying he had now realized true love. Elsewhere, Urza seemed to shudder as if someone had remembered her. Jinny was then curious if Ichiya had asked Anna what he wanted to know, but Ichiya replied that it no longer mattered. Flashing back 400 years, Anna was shown talking to someone. She said she would travel to a time abundant with ether nanos. She was sad, saying they might never meet again, and cried, vowing not to let the Heartfilia bloodline end. And she pleaded with the person to take care of and protect their child, no matter what happened. The person agreed. While wiping her tears, Anna said she would love no one else as long as she lived, but her companion told her not to say that. He added that Anna should seek happiness, certain she would meet another man like him. Anna cried as she called him Tatsuya. Back in the present, Anna embraced Ichiya, saying he was truly a wonderful man. The scene shifted to Hawthorne, a port city in Giltina. Jalal announced that he would be returning to Ishgal. He wished for their journey to be safe. Lucy was surprised that he wouldn't be joining them, and Gray explained that it wasn't possible because it was a fairy tale job. Natsu then asked why Jalal didn't leave with the Saber Gang. Because of this, Carla called him an idiot, while Happy explained that Jalal wanted to spend a little more time with Urza. This caused both Jalal and Urza to blush. And so the others left the two alone, with Gray saying they surely had more to say to each other. They decided to look for a place to stay in the meantime. Lucy added that they would also inquire about the Fire God's castle. Natsu, being clueless, asked what more Urza and Jalal had to say to each other. Lucy pushed him away, telling him to give them some time alone. This left the pair feeling awkward. Urza admitted that Jalal's presence had been a great help. He denied this, saying he was just happy they had resolved the issue with the White Witch. Urza mentioned that they would now search for Ignia, the remaining dragon god, and that their journey was nearing its end. Jalal smiled and asked her to return safely. Urza assured him she would, adding that she missed the Fairy Tale Guild. Jalal then said, when she comes back, if Urza could put in a good word for him. Urza was shocked to realize that he was finally considering joining. Jalal confirmed this, saying he no longer wanted to dwell on the past. He expressed his desire to join Fairy Tale and move forward. He acknowledged that it wouldn't erase the crimes he had committed. Because of this, Urza hugged him, saying they would roll out the red carpet for him and that the master would be delighted. Their faces drew close, and they looked at each other, feeling awkward and blushing simultaneously. Urza apologized, to which Jalal replied it was fine. He smiled and reiterated his wish to join Fairy Tale, emphasizing the need for Urza to return after their job. And so, Urza promised she would do so. Meanwhile, the surroundings of Hawthorne and its establishments were shown. One of them was the Peacock Saloon. The bartender inside said he had never heard of the Fire God's castle. He explained that many adventurers often visited for some local flavor, so he had heard many stories about monsters, labyrinths, and various other things. Wendy asked if there was a guild nearby. The bartender then raised an eyebrow and said that saloons weren't suitable for children. He asked if she was Lucy's daughter, which Lucy denied. Natsu told him to look at them carefully, pointing out that Wendy's hair color was different from theirs. He and Lucy had pink and blonde hair, so their child would. He then asked Lucy what color their child's hair would be. Lucy's eyes widened as she exclaimed, How would she know? Gray remembered that they had a child in Idolas named Nasha, so Lucy mentioned that Gray also had a child with Juvia there. Gray was surprised and said that was a different world. Happy suddenly chimed in, saying Gray was the one who brought it up. Carla interjected and asked again if there was a guild nearby. A customer there answered affirmatively, and so they turned to look at him. The bartender called him Brian and told him to leave the outsiders alone. Brian replied that he was hungry, so he stood up and approached them. He noticed Happy and Carla, asking if they were cats and commenting that they looked delicious. Happy then clarified that they weren't food. Brian just smiled, tossed some dye and said, "Rumbly tummy." Suddenly, Natsu appeared in front of him, surprising Brian. Natsu made it clear that they were his friends and demanded an apology. The bartender tried to stop him and was about to say something about Brian, but Brian said it was okay and admitted he shouldn't have said that. He said it was rude to say they looked delicious when he didn't know how they tasted yet. He immediately extended his hand, revealing a mouth on his palm. Natsu was shocked when he saw Brian's right hand suddenly grow and move to eat Happy and Carla. The two were terrified while Lucy couldn't believe there was a mouth on his hand. Gray wondered if he was really going to eat them. Angry, Natsu punched Brian with flames, knocking him down. The other people inside couldn't believe Brian had been hit. They wondered if Natsu had a death wish. Lucy and Gray were curious about the man, with Gray saying he looked dangerous. Meanwhile, Wendy approached Carla and Happy to check on them. While lying on the floor smoking, Brian just said, "Yum." Wendy was puzzled by this. Brian slowly stood up and said his tummy is full. Natsu was clearly not amused, while Brian was curious about the delicious flames. He grinned and thanked him for the meal. Lucy and the others were shocked that he had eaten Natsu's flames. Wendy thought he had absorbed the flames into his body. Brian then turned to leave. Natsu tried to stop him, but the bartender warned him not to get involved. He revealed that Brian was a member of the Dark Guild Fire and Flame. Everyone in that place knew how despicable that guild was. Brian left the saloon with a smile, while the Fairy Tale Guild members watched him leave. Natsu stood up in anger, but the bartender reminded him again, asking if he had heard him. However, Natsu was extremely irritated because he had told that jerk to wait, but he had left him behind. Consequently, Natsu quickly ran outside, even breaking the door in the process. Lucy called out to him, but it was too late. Gray noticed that the bartender had mentioned fire and flame. Gray then remembered the Signario sisters and said that they were looking for fire and flame. The bartender responded that it would be better if they didn't get involved with them. He explained that Fire and Flame was a dark guild, and all of its members used fire magic. Wendy was shocked to hear this, while Carla commented that there seemed to be no variety there. Happy noticed that the bartender appeared to know something about the Fire God's castle. The bartender didn't answer immediately. He then mentioned that it was the headquarters of Fire and Flame, and their guild master was a young man named Ignia. Lucy and the others were very surprised to hear this from him. However, the bartender wondered why Ignia's appearance hadn't changed despite many years passing, leading him to suspect that Ignia might not be human. Shifting to the Fire God's castle, Ignia was surprised to see that the Signario sisters had finally returned. They apologized, explaining that they had been caught by Viernes. Ignia knew that Viernes was dead now, as were Alderon and Dogramag, and he just smiled. He suddenly remembered to ask if they had met Natsu. Annie replied that she didn't remember much, but that he might have been the one who defeated Viernes. Ignia smiled and said that in 100 years, no one had defeated the dragon gods, and now Natsu was there, taking them down one by one. He also mentioned that Merkphobia and Celine were now on the human side. With his chin resting on his hand, Ignia stated that he would be the one to triumph now, and the Signario sisters just smiled at his statement. While showing the fairy tale members, Ignia said that they still didn't understand why Dogramag had created the Great Labyrinth. They also didn't know that the continent of Giltina would burn one day. Meanwhile, Natsu continued running to chase Brian. He told him to stop, but Brian replied that his stomach was already full and he didn't need any more flames. Brian suddenly thought about the flames and turned to ask Natsu if he was a fire wizard. Natsu was surprised by the question. Brian remembered that Natsu had used fire magic earlier. Natsu replied, asking what if he did use it. Because of this, Brian invited him to join them. Natsu hadn't expected this, while Brian explained that they were gathering fire wizards. Before he could finish speaking, Natsu punched him in the face, telling him to shut up. The punch was so strong that Brian was thrown back again. After Brian's insults to his friends, Natsu said he had no intention of becoming friends with him. Brian grinned and blew fire from the mouth in his hand, saying that if Natsu didn't want to join, he should just die. However, Natsu simply ate the fire Brian had blown, which shocked Brian. Natsu mimicked him and thanked him for the meal. Brian hadn't expected that Natsu could also eat flames. He challenged Natsu to see who could eat more and who would fall first. Natsu just smiled and said he didn't like Brian's crappy flames. Natsu prepared to use his fire dragon magic, which surprised Brian when he heard it. Natsu used fire dragon talons, an extremely powerful fire-enhanced kick, and hit Brian on the head. However, Brian seemed unaffected, and suddenly his hat opened up like a mouth. Natsu hadn't expected this, and his foot got caught in Brian's hat. He tried to pull his foot out, but Brian threw him, sending Natsu flying far away. Brian couldn't believe that Natsu was a fire dragon and realized that he was the Natsu that Ignia had been talking about. Natsu was shocked when he heard the name of the fire dragon god. And so Brian revealed that Ignia had ordered them to bring Natsu to him if they found him. He asked if Natsu would come with him. Natsu just smiled and said, of course, but he needed to talk to his companions first. Brian replied that it wasn't necessary anymore. Natsu was puzzled by this response and noticed a strange smell. He was shocked when he turned around and saw that the surroundings had turned to ash and disappeared. Brian said that Natsu's past had disappeared. Natsu couldn't accept that the entire town had suddenly turned to ash. Natsu sniffed to identify what had happened, but realized it wasn't the smell of burning. Brian hadn't expected Natsu to realize this so quickly. Gradually, the smoke in the surroundings dissipated and the town became visible again. Natsu was surprised that everything was back to normal. In the distance, someone said that his flames showed illusions. However, Natsu had sniffed them out. The man laughed loudly. Natsu didn't seem impressed, while Brian called the man Raj and said he was their guest. While laughing, Raj said he knew because he had been watching all along. Raj asked if Natsu was the boy Ignia was looking for. He then noticed Natsu's pink hair and laughed as he jumped to the ground. Raj asked Brian what's the pink prickly thing he eats, but Brian didn't know and added that he was already full. Suddenly, Raj remembered that Natsu's hair reminded him of a purple sea urchin. Raj then approached Natsu and touched his hair to see if it was sharp. Because of this, Natsu punched him in extreme annoyance, but Raj suddenly disappeared in front of him. Raj laughed at the side, saying it was just an illusion. Brian mentioned that they would take Natsu to Ignia. Natsu agreed and said he would let them take him to Ignia. However, he had been annoyed with both of them for a while, so he wanted to punch them both once first. Again, Raj laughed and asked if Natsu hadn't seen his fire illusions. He said Natsu wouldn't be able to hit him. Natsu took a deep breath before releasing an extremely powerful fire. Raj just grinned and said Natsu was wasting his time. Raj claimed he could easily blend into the surroundings using his illusion magic. However, Natsu said he already knew Raj's scent. So, even though Raj disappeared from his sight, Natsu was still able to identify his location and land a hit. Raj hadn't expected Natsu to attack him so effortlessly. In the background, Brian could be seen preparing to fight next. He stretched out his hand with a mouth to catch Natsu, but Natsu simply jumped onto his hand. Brian was surprised, but Natsu said he already knew how Brian moved. Brian became annoyed, saying Natsu was all talk, so his hat opened again. revealing sharp teeth. However, Natsu fearlessly punched Brian's head, which surprised him. Natsu allowed his hand to be eaten because he was planning to use the Fire Dragon's Flame Elbow move, and his attack was extremely powerful. But Raj intervened to help his comrade. Raj admitted that Natsu was skilled, but he used a fire illusion Furious Wave on him. Natsu was trapped inside the illusion, making Raj laugh. However, Natsu just ate those flames, which shocked Raj. Natsu consumed all of it and prepared to punch him. He had said only once, but Natsu apologized because he was going to punch him again. He approached Raj and used the Flame Dragon's Iron Punch. However, someone intervened and used a flame shield, so Natsu couldn't hit Raj. Natsu was surprised by what happened, while Brian and Raj were pleased and called the newcomer Lekka. Lekka commented that Natsu's fist was hot. He was also a member of Fire and Flame. Natsu couldn't believe they were arriving one by one. It seemed he would have to punch the newly arrived Lekka as well. But Lekka took a stance and used fire make magic. Natsu was puzzled that he could create a flame short sword. He couldn't believe there was a fire version of Gray's magic, but if it was fire, he was confident he could eat it. However, he was surprised when Lekka suddenly slashed at him with the sword. Although Natsu dodged, he couldn't identify what was special about that fire. Lekka used fire make magic again, this time creating a fire make flame lance. This trapped Natsu in a massive pillar of fire. Inside, Natsu wondered why he couldn't eat this fire. Lekka signaled to Brian that it was time. So, Brian extended his hand again and caught Natsu, trapping him in his enormous fist. Lekka said they would now take him to the Fire God's castle. Brian was impressed by Lekka, while Raj was still laughing and wondering why Natsu had punched him. Lekka told Raj that he would be in charge of Natsu's friends, and Raj agreed. But he added that Raj shouldn't touch Urza, and so Brian was curious why. Raj answered that the second in command of Fire and Flame wanted to defeat her personally. On the other side of town, someone confronted Urza. This was Wed, the second in command of Fire and Flame that Lekka had mentioned. Urza asked if he needed help with something. Wed didn't respond and suddenly drew his sword. Urza was shocked because they were in the town proper and asked if he had gone mad. Wed didn't care and prepared his flaming sword. Urza was puzzled when she saw his flame sword. He took a stance to attack. So, Urza had no choice but to fight. She changed her armor and replied that she didn't know who he was, but if he had drawn his sword, then he should be prepared to be cut down. The two began to fight with their swords. The people around them became nervous and ran away. Wed swung his sword, and Urza counterattacked. However, due to his fire, Urza's sword cracked and broke. She hadn't expected this and was surprised. So, she quickly jumped backward and requipped. She used her Fire Empress armor, which could lower the destructive power of flame attacks. Wed charged again while Urza now wielded two swords. Finally, she was able to resist, and her swords didn't break. Wed then released what seemed to be a tornado attack, causing Urza to retreat. His fire hit a boat behind Urza, burning it. Urza, troubled, asked who he was, and he replied that Urza was truly skilled with the sword based on her reputation. He said he wasn't surprised that she was number one with a sword in Ishgal. Urza denied this, saying there were many people in Ishgal at her level. He introduced himself as Wed, claiming to be number one with a sword in Giltina. Urza commented on his confidence in his skills and asked what his purpose was with her. Wed asked whether it was not obvious. He said he wanted to know which of them was stronger. Urza apologized, saying she wasn't interested in that. Wed couldn't believe that was the answer from someone wielding a blade. Urza said her sword wasn't for becoming the best, but rather she used it to protect her friends. Wed replied that Urza's stance was fine. However, he said that battles come when unexpected, and she couldn't run from it. Urza responded that she had no intention of escaping or letting him escape. She also had no interest in seeing which of them was stronger. She then tightened her grip on her sword and said that if someone challenges her to a fight, she won't back down. Back at the Beacock Saloon, Gray pleaded with the bartender to tell them where the fire god's castle was. Lucy added that they needed to go there. The bartender facepalmed and said they must be going crazy. But even Happy and Carla joined in the pleading. Happy noticed that Natsu hadn't returned yet, and Wendy was curious about where he had gone, while Carla asked her what was wrong. Wendy seemed to smell something and said she could smell fire. It was as if a building was burning. Gray became nervous and wondered if it was Natsu. But Wendy denied this and suddenly ran outside. She was shocked to see a forest as soon as she left the saloon. She wondered what was happening and questioned where she was. She was confused and thought about where the saloon had gone and where the others were. Someone laughed behind her, saying there was no one there. It turned out to be a flower speaking, which surprised Wendy because it was talking to her. Meanwhile, Lucy had followed her and was also bewildered because everything had disappeared. She was shocked to find herself suddenly floating. Someone answered that they were up above the sky. A strange figure also spoke to her, praising Lucy's beauty. He asked her if it was okay to play a cuddle game. Lucy couldn't believe it was a talking jello. On the side, Raj was laughing, while his fire illusion could be seen. He said they had no idea that what was in front of them were just illusions created by his flames. Wendy was still confused while Lucy was trying to escape from the one talking to her. Raj said that they were characters from his favorite manga series, Rave Master. Nakajima was the talking flower, and Griff was the jello. Meanwhile, Gray was puzzled because his area was suddenly freezing. Someone spoke behind him, saying it was the demon world. Gray was very shocked by this. It was Hien, and he said it was the freezing demon world. The surroundings were covered in ice, and Hien was staring intensely at Gray, who asked what Hien was because he had dog-like ears. Hien replied that he was a wolf, a Sirius. Gray asked if he meant Sirius Island and said he was now even more confused. Gray looked around and was shocked that the town and his companions had disappeared. Suddenly, Hien drew his sword, saying he had no idea what Gray was talking about. Gray was surprised by the sudden sword attack. However, Hien quickly returned his sword, and Gray was stunned. Gray had already sustained a cut on his body that suddenly froze. He hadn't expected this, and Hien prepared to use Sirius-style Camellia, where he would attack the target with multiple slashes while snow formed camellia petals. Because of this attack, Gray prepared to use Ice Make Icebringer magic. He created a sword, which surprised Hien. Gray asked if he also used ice. On the other side, Wendy was running away from Nakajima while crying. Nakajima told her not to be afraid. He introduced himself as Nakajima and asked if she wanted a flower for her house. While running, Wendy wondered if the flower was an enemy. So, she used Sky Dragon's roar to release a tornado-like blast. Nakajima hadn't expected this and started crying because his third feather was blown away. Wendy wondered what feather he was talking about. Meanwhile, Griff continued to chase Lucy, pestering her for a cuddle game. He said it would be fun, but Lucy kept avoiding him. Lucy was curious about what this jelly thing was, while Griff said he would jiggle her ripe fruits, and he meant Lucy's melons. Griff approached Lucy again, saying he couldn't wait to cuddle her, but Lucy shooed him away with her hand. Raj was laughing heartily while watching the events unfold. He said they were giving it their all and fighting, even though what was in front of them wasn't real. Moreover, characters like Griff wouldn't be able to fly in the current era. Inside the Beacock Saloon, the Exceeds were puzzled by the flames coming from outside. Happy was curious as to what was happening, as flames were blocking the door. Carla was worried about Wendy because of this. The bartender clarified that it was Raj's illusion magic. They were only seeing illusions in those flames. But if they didn't notice it quickly, they would surely burn to death. They couldn't believe what he said. So Carla suggested they rescue them, and Happy agreed. Carla asked if there was a back exit in that place. The bartender answered that there was, but they couldn't defeat someone like Raj. Carla confidently replied, asking who he thought he was talking to. Happy added that they were fairy tale wizards too. The battle between Hien and Gray continued, with Hien commenting, "Not bad," and Gray returning the compliment. Meanwhile, Wendy used Sky Dragon's roar again on Nakajima, while Lucy kicked the Jello Griff. The bartender guided the two exceeds out through the other exit, and once outside, they thought to observe from above. Upon flying, they noticed a man on the roof who was even clapping. It seemed he was the one they were looking for. So they discussed what to do about him. Carla suggested they kick him first. Meanwhile, Gray wondered about the cold, but he thought about whether he ever felt cold like that. Moreover, his ice wound felt hotter than cold. Also, he thought that there was no one with dog ears like his opponent. While Lucy was trying to tear apart the Jello Griff, she wondered what that thing was and why it was so hot. Wendy suddenly shouted that these were just illusions while holding Nakajima. Gray and Lucy heard this. At that moment, Carla and Happy kicked Raj from behind, causing him to fall from the roof. Gray and the others were looking up at him from below. Carla said he was the one creating the illusions, and Gray smiled because they had caught him. Because of that, he said he would defeat him using the attack that Doggy used. Raj was surprised when Gray drew his sword and used Sirius-style Camellia on him. As a result, Raj was encased in ice and couldn't do anything when trapped inside. And when Gray returned his sword, the ice shattered and Raj fell to the ground. Happy said he was also a member of Fire and Flame. Gray suggested to Lucy that they should find Natsu and Urza first, but he was shocked to find that Lucy and Wendy's clothes had burned. After Gray and his friends defeated Raj, he stared at him and wondered what was with that man. Happy explained that he was a member of Fire and Flame, and Carla added that he seemed to use fire to show them illusions. Lucy asked if they all used fire magic, and Wendy fell silent as she imagined facing a bunch of Nazis. Gray said this gave him the heebie-jeebies, while Happy said he'd be happy if Natsu could multiply, causing Carla to respond with a yikes. Because of this, Lucy remembered Aquarius again and sadly thought that if she still had her, their fight would be much easier. Suddenly, a loud explosion occurred nearby, causing them to turn towards it. Gray noticed it came from the harbor, and Wendy remembered Urza and she was there, making her worry. Gray urged them to hurry, so they immediately rushed there, while Lucy shouted to wait and let them get dressed. As they were running, Raj regained consciousness, and upon opening his eyes, he said with a laugh how interesting that was. We then move to the harbor where Urza and Wed's battle continues. Their swords clashed, and when Urza was pushed back by the force of Wed's swing, she quickly re-equipped into another armor, and she used Armadura Fairy and charged again. She also enhanced her sword with Heavenly Body Magic, Enchant, which caught Wed's attention. As she approached, she used Fairy Sword, Shooting Star, making Urza look like a giant star rushing towards Wed. However, Wed still managed to block her extraordinary attack and commented on Urza's speed. He kicked her as a counter and prepared to attack with his own technique. Wed raised his sword, which began to be engulfed in flames, and used Killer Flame High King Sword, bringing it down towards Urza. This caused a large portion of the ground in front of him to be destroyed. Urza's eyes widened at his attack, and soon it hit her, its power so great that it also destroyed the buildings beside the harbor. Some civilians ran to avoid getting caught in this chaos. Urza stood up from the rubble she was thrown into, showing the damage she had taken. She couldn't believe that her strongest armor was broken by her opponent. Wed corrected her, saying that Urza is actually strongest when she's bare, and he knows this. This caught Urza's attention, and she suddenly remembered her sexy armor, causing her to blush. Wed pointed out that he was referring to the Hakama. Urza was surprised by this and commented that Wed seemed to have researched her. He began listing the times she used that armor to win, such as in Pandemonium, the Scarlet Despair, and even when defeating the Signario sisters. Wed prepared to attack again and said he was sure Urza was the number one sword in Ishgal, and added that his sword would cry if he couldn't cut her down. They returned to their serious demeanors, but just as they were about to charge at each other again, something flew above them shouting Fire Bu Wedii, catching both their attention, and Urza thought it was a firebird. It suddenly crash-landed hard in front of them, and Wed called it misfortune, which confused Urza. The flame-like creature said it had a message for Wed, calling him Weddy. Soon, we're shown this creature that looks like a cat made of fire. She told Wed that he needed to go home because something was going to start earlier than they had thought. Wed just stared at this, while Urza was surprised to see that it was a cat. When she called her to say she was delighted to meet her, addressing her as Urzi, she thought this cat was a happy made of fire. Wed seemed dismayed at what he heard and said no, adding that if that was happening, it was even more reason for him to settle this while he still had a chance. After that, we move to the Fire God's castle, where Brian and Lekka have arrived. They told Ignia that they had brought Natsu, calling him a hot one. Ignia smiled at this, and soon Brian released Natsu from his hat's mouth. As soon as Natsu came out, he was shouting, asking what they thought they were doing, and if that was the case, he'd fight all three of them at once, so they should come at him. He quickly stopped when he noticed something, and his eyes widened when he saw Ignia, who welcomed him to his castle. Natsu was confused as he stared at Ignia, while Ignia's subordinates also stared at him. Ignia explained that he had summoned him to this place to give him one last chance, which puzzled Natsu. Ignia pointed out that he was Natsu Dragneel, the wizard his father, Igneel, deemed worthy of his attention, and suddenly asked if he wanted to join them, which confused Natsu again. Ignia said that the Dragon King Festival was about to begin, and he would allow Natsu to join them for it. Natsu was shocked when he heard Dragon King Festival, so Ignia said it wasn't like what he had experienced, and they should call it the true Dragon King Festival. Natsu's vision seemed to darken when he heard this, and he clenched his fists, while Ignia continued to tell him to join them. As Ignia was saying they would destroy humans together, Natsu suddenly charged in anger and delivered a fire dragon's punch to Ignia's face, shocking all of Ignia's companions. As the smoke cleared, it appeared that Natsu's punch had no effect. Ignia commented that he understood, and that Natsu was one of the humans they would crush. Ignia's subordinates' eyes widened at this, and Natsu asked if Ignia was really Igneel's son, because his father loved humans and he doesn't. Ignia just closed his eyes and said heh, then immediately repelled Natsu using his own fire magic. He seriously stated that his father was his father, and he was himself. As Natsu was thrown back, he wondered what kind of flames those were, while Ignia was saying that all the humans in that room were ready to go to the Dragon World. Natsu's eyes widened and he asked what the Dragon World was, so Ignia pointed out that he had already told him this, and said that the true Dragon King Festival was a festival of humans and dragons. An intense aura enveloped the surroundings as they stared at each other, and then something flashed from the ceiling of the room, catching Natsu's attention. Suddenly, a powerful beam fell, and it seemed that someone had arrived, releasing a strong impact on the floor, causing Natsu and the others to wonder what it was. The newcomer suddenly commented, questioning Ignia's statement that it was a festival of humans and dragons, saying that it wasn't correct. Confusion was visible on Natsu and Ignia's faces as they looked to see who had arrived. We suddenly returned to Urza and Wed's situation, where Urza was shocked when Wed told her about the true Dragon King Festival. Wed also explained that once it starts, he won't be able to settle things with Urza. Misfortune shouted at Wed not to tell Urza too much, and suddenly they heard the powerful beam that fell to the ground, catching everyone's attention. Misfortune became worried, initially thinking it had started, but quickly realized something else was happening, and became even more concerned when he saw it came from the Fire God's castle. Wed was also surprised, and Misfortune told him that they needed to return there. Gray and the others arrived on the scene, and they quickly asked Urza if she was okay. When they noticed Wed and Misfortune, Carla thought they were Fire and Flame members. Happy looked at Misfortune, and as he stared at her, his eyes seemed to light up, and his heart started beating, causing Happy to fall in love again because of how cute this fire cat was. Happy offered Misfortune a fish, which irritated Carla. Misfortune tried to call Happy's name, adding the letter Y at the end. As she stared at Happy holding a fish, She also squealed and commented on how cute Happy was. Happy imitated her and asked what her name was, causing Carla to fall silent on the side while saying they were becoming chummy with each other. Wood quickly urged Misfortune to leave, and when Gray heard his name, Lucy thought it was the opposite of Happy. Misfortune told Happy that this might be fate, to which Happy agreed. Wed, forced to leave, showed visible dismay and forced himself to turn his back on Urza, saying they'd meet again if fate allowed it, which made Urza stare at him irritatedly. Gray shouted to follow the light beam because it was coming from the fire god's castle, but Lucy paused to think about what that light could be and soon thought it might be black magic. After that, we return to the fire god's castle, where the black beam of light continues to fall, puzzling and unnerving those present. Ignia seriously asked the being who fell there who it was, and the being began to explain that a battle took place in Ishgal a year ago called the Dragon King Festival. It was said to be a battle between humans, Acnologia, and a black wizard. The being called Ignia the Fire Dragon God and pointed out that something was missing for the Dragon King Festival. As the black light surrounding it gradually disappeared, it said that it needed a black wizard. Natsu and Ignia's eyes widened, and they seemed to feel an immense pressure. It turns out that Ferris had arrived, introducing herself as Black Wizard Ferris and saying she would join that battle. Confusion was visible on Natsu's face as he stared at her, while Ignia commented in his mind that he felt Acnologia in this woman. Ferris smiled at them after appearing, and while both were staring at her, Natsu suddenly felt different and was pleased to see her. However, her appearance was said to be very different, with Ferris giving them an eerie stare. Because of this, Natsu happily thought that she might be the Ferris from Idolas, which prompted Brian to ask in shock if the magic world had gone crazy, using the term Rip Rip. Lekka agreed with him, saying he heard they couldn't use magic in Idolas. Ferris then explained that many worlds exist in that universe, and it said that all of them contain versions of the same people. For example, she said that her Idolas counterpart is just a woman living in the countryside, while her counterpart in Alinter is a white shrine maiden who harmonizes the magic of that world. Natsu asked what she meant by that, so Ferris pointed out that she is the Ferris of Earthland. Ignia smirked at this and said he didn't care who she was, but he didn't want her here. He also questioned that Ferris was a black wizard, and that Zerif was dead, as well as Acnologia. The Signario twins and Natsu were shocked when they heard Ignia mention Acnologia's name, and when he mentioned it, Natsu said, "Why did he feel Acnologia and Ferris?" So Ferris explained that she was a black wizard and a black magic dragon, Pitch Black Wings. Ignia prepared to attack while saying how interesting Ferris was, but he was in the middle of talking to Natsu about an important matter, which left Natsu speechless and asking if that was really true. As Ignia was about to launch his attack, he seriously told Ferris to get out of their way, to which Ferris nonchalantly asked if Ignia was afraid of Acnologia, while raising her hand to match Ignia's attack. Their attacks caused a strong impact, and when they collided, it resulted in a powerful energy blast on both sides of the Fire Dragon's castle. Fear and nervousness were visible on the faces of Brian and the other members of Fire and Flames when they saw this scene, while Ignia and Ferris just smiled at each other after their attacks subsided. When they looked closely at Ferris's hand that she used for that extraordinary attack, Ignia and Natsu's eyes widened because of its appearance, and they seemed unable to believe it. Just as Natsu was about to point out that the hand looked familiar, Ferris explained, while showing us a part of Igniel and Acnologia's battle, that Igniel bit Acnologia's hand here and cut it off, and when she saw Acnologia's severed left arm, it gave her power. The power of black darkness. She said she was the embodied will of Acnologia and the being that would destroy everything. Ignia's eyes widened when he heard this, but he quickly regained his composure and ordered the Signario sisters to do whatever it was he was referring to which the siblings complied, bringing their hands together to create a bright fireball. The sisters were gradually enveloped in flames, and confusion was visible on Natsu's face, while Ferris's smile had disappeared. Soon after, the entire Fire Dragon's castle was engulfed in flames, and Ignia declared that the true Dragon King festival was beginning. Natsu shouted, asking what was happening, while Ferris's brow furrowed. Ignia called out to Natsu and explained that in their country, they called defeating the 5 dragon gods the 100 Years quest because it had taken 100 years, and no one had been able to defeat them. Natsu was puzzled, and Ignia added that they had sealed 4 of them, asking if that didn't seem impossible. He pointed out that they were only able to do so because the dragons didn't fight them seriously, which made Natsu's eyes widen upon hearing it. Ignia further explained that Dogramag had spread its roots throughout the entire continent, suppressing his power, and all of that was for this day. Suddenly, a loud roar came from the Signario sisters, and Ferris's eyes widened as she realized it was dragonization magic, with even Natsu visibly shocked. An enormous beam enveloped the fire dragon's castle, and this phenomenon occurred in other parts of the continent as well. At the Wizard Guild Diabolos, Celine's body began to glow, startling herself, Suzaku, and their other companions, who wondered what was happening as they watched her glow. In the city of Ermina, fear was visible on the faces of Kashima and other civilians, who were shouting about what was happening to the water dragon god there. Even Carmil was crying in fear while watching Merkfovia, who had transformed into his dragon form, causing her to question why he had transformed there. The Alchemist Guild, Gold Owl, was shown. The place gradually transformed into a dragon. As a result, Viernes, the dragon form of the metal dragon god, was revived. Meanwhile, on the other side, the ruins of Drasil were displayed. From the ground, roots emerged and gradually grew until it became Aldoran, the wood dragon god. In the city of Ermina, Caramil became worried when she saw Merkphobia transform into a dragon again. Because of this, water poured from the sky, destroying houses and buildings in the city. And the dragon form of the water god dragon, Merkphobia, was shown. People were terrified by the sudden event, so they ran away, including Kashima. While looking up, Caramil wondered what kind of power this was. She said it was beyond what they faced when fighting Fairy Tail, or even the fire dragon god Ignia. The power now couldn't be compared to those. Shifting to the Wizard Guild of Diabolos, Celine also turned into a dragon again, shocking the guild members. They asked their master what the problem was, commenting on how she loved humans. Suzaku was surprised because Celine's dragon form was now larger than when he had fought her. While Kirin mentioned that they were dragon slayers and asked if there was anything they could do in this situation, Misaki emphasized that this was the power of a dragon god. Meanwhile, Mad Mole noticed something outside and pointed it out to them. Through the window, an enormous lacrima could be seen. Back at the fire god's castle, it was already engulfed in flames. Ignia said that Dogramag had spent centuries spreading its roots throughout the continent, creating the Great Labyrinth of Dogra. Natsu and Ferris became concerned when Ignia said he could activate the dragon gods and turn humans into dragons. Ignia then said he's gonna create a dragon nation. Just like what happened 400 years ago, there would once again be a world where dragons could freely fly in the sky. Ferris smiled upon hearing this and said it was interesting. If that's the case, she said he would destroy both humans and dragons. That was supposedly the will of his left arm from Acnologia. Natsu thought for a moment before saying that he would fight for humanity. He declared that he would face both of them, Ignia and Black Magic Ferris, saying he was all fired up. Lucy, Urza, Gray, and Wendy were confused by this. Suddenly, Natsu had been transported to where the other Fairy Tail Guild members were. He was shocked to see them. Gray admitted that Natsu had worried them, while Wendy mentioned they were in Magia Dragon. Urza added that Elefsiria had used his magic to bring him back there. Elefsiria apologized for this and said that something big was happening. Athena called it an emergency, which was why they transported him back. Natsu said that something big had happened to him as well. Happy was curious about what it was, and Carla suggested they exchange information. Back at the Fire Dragon God Castle, the Fire and Flame members were wondering why Natsu had suddenly vanished. Eni explained that it was Elefsiria's power. On the side, Ferris laughed and said, "Game on," to Ignia. She asked whether Ignia's dragon world or her black magic world would prevail. As she gradually disappeared, she wondered if humans might win instead. Ignia remained silent while Lekka was concerned that Ferris had vanished as well. Brian replied that Ferris would only cause trouble for them. Ignia said that it wouldn't be a problem anymore. Anyway, they were going to create a dragon world now. They would all become dragons. He confirmed if they were ready to cast aside their humanity. The Fire and Flame members smiled, seeming prepared. A forest is shown where Ferris had apparently gone. She stated that the true Dragon King Festival was beginning, with many dragons, people fighting against them, and herself as the Black Wizard. She ordered them come out, revealing that she had called upon the Oration Cease, the demons from Ferris's book. So the questions now is, who would prevail? Humans, dragons, or the Black Wizard? Shifting back to Magia Dragon, Elefseria's wall tablet can be seen. The crests of the 5 dragon gods are shining. Elefseria appears nervous as the sky glows and ether nanoparticles evaporate. The crow mentions that this is bad. Gray and the others are puzzled by this, wondering who he is and why he's talking. And so Natsu asks who he is again. Wendy answers that it's Shade, the bird of passage. According to Shade's intel network, all the dragon gods they had defeated have been revived and are now rampaging. Athena adds that even Viernes is included. Elefseria's face remains worried as he mentions that Mercphobia and Selene are also involved. Despite this, Natsu remains positive, saying they've defeated them once before, so they can surely do it again. However, Elefseria states that their powers have increased. In fact, this might be their true power level. Moreover, giant lacrimas have appeared in the locations of the 5 dragon gods, and these lacrimas are turning people into dragons. Gray can't believe what he's hearing. Even the Exceeds are shocked that they're forcing everyone to become dragons. Urza wonders what's really happening. Natsu recalls their earlier conversation at the Fire God's castle, where Ferris mentioned dragonization magic. Natsu can't believe it and wonders if this is the Dragon King Festival Ignia was referring to. Lucy suggests that if the lacrimas are turning people into dragons, perhaps destroying them will return everyone to normal. Wendy adds that it might also end the rampage of the 5 dragon gods. Natsu is excited about the plan and says they'll destroy all the giant lacrimas. Plus, there are 5 of them and 5 enemies. Happy mentions that he and Carla are there to help too. Natsu suddenly remembers that Ferris is also involved. The Earthland Ferris is apparently a bit of a baddie. Urza is confused by this. Natsu just smiles, ready to destroy the lacrimas before they turn all the people in that continent into dragons. Each of them will destroy 1 lacrima. They smiled, indicating acceptance to the plan. Suddenly, Elefseria interrupts the conversation and asks if they plan to fight separately. Natsu replies that it would be faster that way. He tells Elefseria not to worry because when they accept a job, they always complete it. So he declares that Fairy Tail's now about to complete the 100 years quest. Back in the forest, Ferris is seen talking to the Oration Cease. She says it appears that Ignia wants to turn the entire continent into a world of dragons, and the humans are acting to stop him. Ferris says their goal is to defeat both groups and create a world of the Black Wizard, where neither humans nor dragons will be needed. Gaia agrees with this and wishes for the world they create to overflow with love. Demon asks who needs love, saying that as long as he has black, she will melt. Meanwhile, Bird seems excited because both the human and dragon groups will fall to the ground before their might. Blade insists that he will cut them all with his demonic blade, while Gate is looking forward to the time when they release his power. Someone suddenly tells them to pipe down, calling them kids. His name is Zero, saying they don't need any more words for destruction. They just need to reduce everything to 0. Demon taunts him, saying that's rich coming from an ex-human. She then suggests melting him, to which Zero replied, "Interesting." Ferris asked them to stop, mentioning she used to be a human too. She then says that those under black demonic influence will no longer be human. She raises her left arm, saying she gained power from Acnologia and became the Black Wizard, while Zero gained power from Nirvana and became a demon. Zero responds that as long as he can destroy everything, he doesn't care. He owes his life to Ferris. Zero suddenly turns his back and says that, nevertheless, he won't follow orders. He'll just do what he wants. Ferris says that's fine, but Bird tells her that she's just encouraging Zero. Zero smiles and says that when the job is done, he'll destroy them too. Gate responds that Zero is going too far, and Blade threatens to split him in half. However, Ferris says it's okay, and she likes that side of Zero. She says she'll share a bit of information to excite them about their job. She then reveals that the people fighting against the dragons are from the Fairy Tale Guild. Vane suddenly appears on Zero's forehead in anger when he hears fairy tale. Meanwhile, in the city of Ermina, the sky is seen enveloped in water. This is where Lucy went, and she's shocked by what happened. She thinks it's Mercphobia's power, so she needs to find the Lacrima quickly. She starts running but almost gets swept away by what seems like a whirlpool. Large rocks are floating in the air, which Lucy tries to avoid but ends up tripping. And when she stands up, she's surprised to see many dragons approaching her. She can't believe that these might be the people of Ermina who have now become dragons. The dragons start charging at Lucy one by one, but fortunately, she manages to dodge. The people-turned dragons are clearly not in their right minds, and their attacks are so powerful that their fists smash into the wall when they miss Lucy. Lucy quickly runs to escape from them. She thinks that if she had been hit by one of those attacks, she would surely be dead. The ground cracks, revealing water underneath. Lucy descends into it, and is surprised to find that there's water underground as well. She notices a creature nearby. She says that anyone targeting the water god will have to go through her. Lucy can't believe that it's Caramel, who is also turned into a dragon.